Hi!
This is the first official What We Read we're uploading this year that actually features some of the books we read in 2021.
That's right. And for some of us started great, some of us not so much. And by that, I mean me. In which case, so let's start great, do my thing, and then end great.
What he means is I've actually managed to read a fair number of books already halfway into January.
And they're probably good, so...
Most of them have been pretty good, I would say. So I'm going to start with a Kindle book that I read, and it is Coming Up Roses by Stacey Hart. Ooh. This is part of a series that is inspired by, I think it's inspired a little bit by Pride and Prejudice, because there's a family in the series called the Bennet family. This particular story is sort of a second chance romance because the main character in it, she works at a flower shop for the Bennet family. And she has a thing where she kind of hates the youngest son in the family because he did something back in the day and now he's coming back to town. They all have to come back to town in order to work to save the flower shop because they're being overrun by other flower shop competition. So yeah, they try to fix that in the book as well. And you know what? This book was so charming. First of all, it made me want to work in a flower shop or at least visit a flower shop because it's just like, it was a family-owned flower shop somewhere in like downtown Manhattan and it just sounded so delightful to read about. There's like a greenhouse at the back.
Sure, yeah.
There's a huge like, you know, display area for the shop and it was great and that part was lovely. I also really enjoyed the characters a lot. I think it was charming to have the whole Bennet clan there and she gender flipped them, so instead of having a lot of girls, they were actually mostly brothers.
Okay.
So it was really fun to read that sort of gender flip type thing too. And I enjoyed the secondary characters, so the siblings, the parents, the friends in the book. The romance too, which was probably the key part because this is a romance, is definitely my favorite part because a lot of things that happened between them that kept them apart or made it hard for them to be together felt really realistic. Like, this is one of those things where the miscommunication trope worked well for me, which I was a little surprised by. And also the way they resolved their problems kind of worked well for me too, because I felt like their responses felt realistic and not so much dramatic, if that makes sense. And I really appreciated that. It didn't go the way I thought it was going to go either.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which was also good for me, like the journey, especially romantic journey, was worth it. I really enjoyed it and I actually would definitely pick up the rest of the books in the series because I do want to see what happens with the other brothers, honestly. But this one was really fun and I would highly recommend checking it out. The second book is actually an audiobook that I listened to. It is Cobble Hill by Cecily von Zigazar. She is the writer of the Gossip Girl series, which is probably where you know her from, if anything. This is an adult novel she wrote and it's basically just about a neighborhood in Brooklyn called Cobble Hill and the residents of said neighborhood and their lives and their secrets and their stories. It's one of those books where it was both slice of life in the way that a slice of life anime is, where it's literally just these are the people and these are the things they do every day and these are the secrets they keep and the relationships they have with each other. But it's also like there's like a subgenre of stories that I personally enjoy, and I know Kristen does too, where we like to read about people who are not necessarily the greatest people who feel human because they sometimes make terrible choices when faced with options, and you just know it's not going to end well for them, and it's still kind of compelling to watch it happen. This is the kind of story that is. Yeah. But it is kind of balanced out because it was a little more lighthearted in some aspects, which I thought was good. I just find it interesting in many ways, even though it is still an exaggerated version of real life. It feels like real life because there are people who would make terrible choices when put in positions that they're forced to make a choice in. I don't think it's one of those books that I will find particularly memorable the more distance I get from it, because that's just the kind of story it was. But for what it was diverting at the time. Sure. Which I think sometimes is all you can really ask for. It was fun to read about Cobble Hill, honestly, like New York neighborhood. I'm a sucker for that too, so that was fun. But yeah, it was good, diverting, more of a borrow than a buy, personally. So I'm just gonna point that out. And the last book I'm gonna mention in this section is actually one I read with my sisters and my cousin for our book club. It is the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. It is nonfiction, which is something I rarely read, but I did think it was a really interesting book because it focuses on habits and sort of gives you a unique approach, or at least unique to me, approach where he basically points out the 4 ways you can make a habit easier, like to make it easier to get in the groove of the habit, basically. And I really appreciated them because it feels like practical advice. Each of us started applying it to our own lives, basically. And it started to work. I like his practical take on it. I like that he kept it simple, but he also provided a lot of like factual things from other sources as well to prove his points. Overall, like I feel like I got something out of the book, and I think sometimes that's what I'm looking for when I read self-help type thing. So I would recommend it. It's not even that long a book as well. It would not take too long to read whatsoever. And a lot of the points he makes are very helpful, so you definitely should check it out if you think that it sounds interesting to you.
All right, cool. So my dismal start of the year reading-wise is not just because I haven't read enough as much as I would like, though I am catching up technically according to Goodreads. But this probably was not just especially because of just the climate right now. Hopefully things have died down by the time this video gets posted. I would not recommend reading this book now. It's called Evil Empire by Max Bemis. And I thought it was vampires. I really did. I should have, because I have this thing where if I read something, I kind of don't want to read the synopsis because I don't want to be spoiled in any way whatsoever. And then some of the covers were just like an Uncle Sam with like fangs, and I'm like, oh hey, did vampires take over America? No, it was just really bad people. And it sort of launches between 25 years later, kind of when the evil empire was finally a thing, and then 25 years ago when that was sort of like progressing along. And it sort of uses that juxtaposition. And apparently it's just really, really bad people. And then the world falls into this terrible dystopia where everybody, you know, succumbs to, and I'll leave it at that so it's not too spoilery, succumbs to something that the main bad guys in the story call post-fascism or whatever that is, where they're like, it's the free-for-all with morals and you can just do whatever you want and we're the enforcers of that kind of, you know, thing. And I'm just like, oh boy. Again, maybe not the smartest choice. I'm hoping things would have died down into a better thing by the time this video comes up. On that note, it's well written for post-apocalyptic, my mood and the, you know, climate aside. It's pretty well written. A tad bit too preachy and on the nose. It tells a lot more than it shows. It's not necessarily in a bad way, but if that's not your thing, if you just want, just give me my dystopia without the explanation. Cool. Which is ironic because the story elements of it are unapologetic. The story elements of it are every time you wanna, you know, there's always a backstory for like this and they subvert those tropes. So it's kind of strange how they go heavy on the theme, but not so much on the narrative sort of beats that these things sort of have when it comes to just like who are the villains, who are the good guys and the bad guys. I do like how it resolved. It makes sense. It didn't feel too much like a cop-out the way like that other dystopian thing I did with actual vampires.
Oh my gosh, vampire.
No, not Vampire State. The vampire future dystopia where like the world freezes over and vampires take over. It didn't feel like that. It didn't feel like that kind of a throwaway. Here it felt there was kind of like a resolution. It felt like the world will right itself. And I like, well, not right itself, well, as best as it could, right? Because there's only so much of human nature, even if you go to any extreme, where the other thing is going to happen. And we always find ourselves in longer eras of the messy middle.
True.
Because there's only so much like...
I mean, that's the era
right? Because there's only so much enlightenment that we can take before people get lazy and dumb. And there's only so much like terrible darkness we can take before the whole world rises up in arms against it. So it's the messy middle, which is really life if you think about it. So on that somber note, here's the rest of the cool stuff you read.
Well, we actually are going to go into a little bit more of a lighthearted place, to be fair, because I am going to talk about a book called Boyfriend Material,
there you go.
which is by Alexis Hull.
Read that.
And this is a book that DJ recommended to me, which is probably unsurprising to most of you that know you, because DJ usually recommends most of my romance reads. Anyway, this is actually a fake dating story. It is about Luke O'Donnell. He is sort of tangentially famous because his parents were like rock stars, sort of. They're divorced now, I think. So he kind of gets in the papers a lot just for being the son of like these two people.
Yeah.
And his reputation, not the greatest. And he needs to save face because he works for a charity foundation, and a lot of the people who donate are pulling out because they keep seeing news about him in the papers. Enter Oliver, who is basically the template of a perfect boyfriend. He's a barrister, he's like well put together, he's polite, you know, all of the things. And he also needs someone to bring to a specific family occasion that he has. So these two end up making an agreement to fake date. And you know, at first when I started reading this book, I was like, it's probably gonna be like an average rating for me because I wasn't really hooked right away. I think a lot of people were, but for me it took a while for me to get there. However, eventually it won me over, even though a lot of it had like exaggerated moments, especially the drama. I think I liked it and resonated with it because Luke and Oliver felt like real people who were just looking for something real in a world that had constantly let them down time and time again. And I think a lot of us can relate to that struggle. Eventually I got so emotionally invested in their romance because I felt like they were good for each other even though they were basically nothing alike in terms of personality. Like they helped each other grow in certain ways because they were able to push just enough. Like it never felt like they were forcing each other to change a little bit. It just felt like a natural progression for them to like you know, slowly open themselves up, slowly emotionally start to, you know, vibe with each other. And it was really great watching them really actually fall in love with each other, even though a lot of frustrating things happen over the course of this book. I also really like that there's a big like laugh factor in this book. Like, there are a lot of hilarious moments in it, and I was just like dying because like the way they play out, I'm like, it is like sort of film magic shenanigans of a sort, and I really appreciate that. Plus there was like also a fun like friendship aspect to it, which I also appreciated a lot too. So I really resonated with this in the end, and of course that meant that my, you know, investment in them getting together was really huge. So I was really traumatized whenever they would miscommunicate, and I'm just like, don't, come on, you deserve to be together. This is actually one of those rare occasions where there's no epilogue, and I would have really liked an epilogue.
Oh, interesting.
But it does end on a very sweet note, and I think, like, if anyone decided to write a bonus epilogue, I would be here for it. So yeah, this was really fun to read. Speaking of romance, the next book is also a romance read, and it's the first book I read in 2021. It is Archangel's Son by Nalini Singh. This is the 13th book in this series, so it has been a time.
Oy.
The thing is, a lot of the background setting of this world and the situation that the characters are in is informed by everything that's happened, so I can't really go into specifics, but I can tell you who it's about. Although if you really don't want to know, then you could probably just skip to the next part of this video. I'll leave the timestamp down below for anyone who wants to do that. But Archangel's Son is about an archangel named Titus and an angel named Shireen, who most people in this series know as the Hummingbird, who is one of the greatest angelic artists of her time.
Oh.
It is a story about the two of them, and when I first heard that, I was like, really? Those two? And you know what? After finishing the book, I'm like, Nalini Singh can convince me to like anything because I loved their story. I think they're good for each other in that they have these things that they're both struggling with, and they're perfect when they're butting up against each other because it challenges them to push past certain boundaries that they have in a good way. And I loved it so much, okay? It was the perfect book to come after like the big arc that ended in the last one. It was just so good. Like, everything about this was great. The romance was so sweet. The two characters were just fun to read about, and I loved seeing a lot of the other friends and side characters that we met along the way in the series. Like, I don't really know what else to tell you about this one, except that it was like a nice, first of all, it was a nice emotional break because the last book was really traumatizing.
Fair.
But I also just, I don't know, I found it so delightful to watch these two fall in love. Like, it was not a pairing I could have ever seen coming, and yet after finishing this book, I'm like, well, nobody else would have made sense for either of them. So you know what? We're gonna go with it, and I am fully supportive of it, and I'm so glad that I read this book.
Going hard, going fast.
Yes.
That's awesome.
The last book is actually my first 5-star book of the year.
Ah.
And I'm really happy about that because I had high expectations for this one going into it. And you know what? Kind of lived up to it. The book in question is Eva Evergreen, Semi-Magical Witch by Julie Abe. This is the first in a series, and I hope to God it is a series that lasts for a while because it's so great. Okay, so obviously the one main reason I did pick up this book is because it reminded me a little bit of Kiki's Delivery Service. So Eva has come into her magic fairly recently, but she's of the age where she can go on a quest to become a novice witch. The problem is Eva's magic is very different from her peers in that she has a limited amount of it, and she also tends to it tends to drain her after she uses it, so she kind of falls asleep like right after she like sort of uses her magic. So her story is already unconventional to begin with, and now she has to prove herself in order to become a novice witch. So she has to find a town that needs her help and like get into the town and sort of do her magic in the town and earn their gratitude, and I guess like they need to sign like a sort of contract to prove that she's actually helped them, right? I love it because it really does deliver on the Kiki's Delivery Service vibes front, but it is also its own thing. And I think that's an important distinguishing factor to make. There are magical elements to this world that are very specific to Eva's world, and I love that. I think Julie did such a good job integrating these magical creatures and like magical abilities, and that was really fun. But at its heart, the best thing about this is that it is a very big friendship story. Like, there's such an emphasis on friendship and relationships in it, and I loved it. I think it is one of the most charming things about middle grade a lot of the time, like seeing the main character form friendships or find a newfound family. Like, those are all the things that like warm my heart, and that was like one of the biggest parts of this book that like just gave me feelings, okay? She also did a good job with giving us Eva's story, where she has to learn, and this is I think a very common thing in middle grade stories, where like the main character has to learn, like they have to work with what they've got and love what they have. instead of like comparing themselves. In Eva's case, her mom is a very, very talented, naturally gifted
Oh dear.
witch.
Okay.
And so of course that's like something, that's like sort of the standard she also holds herself to, and it frustrates her when she cannot do things the way that other people would do things. And like it's so heartwarming just to watch her journey, going from someone who's like frustrated with her sort of limited magic to being someone who's like, well, this is what I have, so this is what I'm gonna do. And like I cried at the end of this book. Like that's how much I loved it. Like I was like sobbing at the end of it.
So bad.
And it was so good and so delightful and so heartwarming, and I'm so excited that there's a sequel. My gosh, like you guys do not understand how much I love this book. So definitely would recommend checking it out. It is a great read, whether you are an adult who loves middle grade stories, whether you are gonna give it to an actual middle grade reader. This is like one that I would highly recommend. I even told Macky, I was like, he has to read it because I think he would love it. So definitely check that out. And with that, we have come to the end of this particular What We Read video. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you read any of the books in this video or have any questions about them, leave them in the comments. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. We hope you guys are doing well so far in 2021. It's kind of been a year already, and it's not even been a full month. But here's to hoping things get better, and here's to hoping that the good vibes we're sending translate through the air.
That's true.
We'll see you guys in a new video soon. Bye!